Okay, so I will start. My name is Hallengren. I'm from Sweden, working in Czech Bank in Denmark, investment bank, and I'm going to talk about extended events. A little bit intro to extended event, but more about how we've been using extended event in our environment and how we built like performance monitoring system in Czech Bank, and some techniques that we have been used in and some of the experiences. Here's my contact information. You're always welcome to send a mail. So can I ask first, how many of you are using extended event today? Okay, okay. And you others, are you using Profiler still, or are you working with other stuff? Okay. So yeah, a little bit of intro first. So extended event was introduced in SQL Server 2008 as a replacement for trace and profiler. So Microsoft built a new architecture and is more lightweight than the old trace and profiler. And yeah, it came in 2008, but it was first in 2008. 2012 it became really good. There was then they added like all events that was in profiler. They like ported them over to extended events. Everything you get out is in XML as opposed to in trace. Everything XML. First in 2008 there was no user interface, but in 2012 Microsoft added a user interface also. So you can either use that or you can use xQuery in SQL Server to access the data. And there's also a function that you can use to if you want to read from an extended event file and get it up into yeah, as a record set. So I will show you a little bit how it looks like. So this is how you create an extended event session. So first you specify, okay, what should the session be named? That's like the name of the trace. And then there's like different events. So for example, for those of you that are using Profiler, there's one called RPC completed. Here's also one that's called RPC completed. And you can set some filters. So for example, duration, everything above a certain duration. And you can also specify something called actions. And actions, that is like, so in this event it means that, okay, whenever it comes an RPC completed that is matching this threshold, then it should also go out and get these like additional columns. So you should get the application name, client host name, process IDs, and so on. So it's like additional information. They call it actions. So all events they have like a package of like base columns, and then you can define this action, as they call it. And then they have something called targets, and that means that okay, when the events has been like collected, what should SQL Server do with them? And the most common one, it's called event file. So that is just like a server side or profile or trace. It's writing to a file. And you can also define some additional properties. You can say that. For example, every time it's SQL Server starts, it should also start a trace. You can also say how many files, size of files, and a few other settings, memory settings, and so on. So this is like how it looks like. So if we then look at one of those extended event files that it like produce, you can look at it like this in Management Studio. And then you can see, for example, if we take one here, batch completed, for example, you have the event here, and then you have additional columns. You can show them here in the grid also if you want. I will also show the user interface for creating. I showed before how to create extended event using script, but there's also a user interface now. So you go in here, management, extended events, and then sessions, and then you can say new session. So for example, okay, you just have to specify name of the session. There are some options here, like I said before, startup, what event you want. You would take this one again, RPC completed. You just find the events you want. And then you can do like configurations. So you go in here. You specify those additional columns you want. Let's say that you want host name. You want to set some filters. Let's say duration. And these here, those are like the fields that you get like in the base package. You can specify if you want a statement or not for an RPC event. And here are those targets, like I said before. There's one called event file, and that's the most useful, I think. There's also another one called ring buffer that's quite commonly used, that is only writing to memory. But then if SQL Server is crashing or something, then you don't have anything. So the event file is, I think, it's most useful. Then it's also like this, that there is something called an dispatch latency. That means that when an event is generated, then it's like, even if you specify file, it's not written directly to the file. It's like written to memory, something called buffers in memory. And then what you specify here is how long time it maximum can take until this the event is like flushed from the memory buffers to disk to the files. So 30 seconds is the default, but in most cases that is just fine. So you can just leave it to that. So it's quite easy to, now when there's user interface in Management Studio, it's quite easy to create it. And you can also then, if you want, you can script them out. If you then, of course, modify it and create it again and so on. So this is like the, you can say the, building blocks in extended events, how you can use it. Any questions? Please ask. Another thing that you can do is that, okay, let's say that you want to, yeah, of course.
Event loss, what is the event?
Oh, the event loss, that is, I will show you here. Okay, so the question from SQL Server is what to do when there's like too many events coming at the same time. What should it do? One option is to say that you don't want to lose any event. You want to be guaranteed to have every event. That means that then it is like slowing down SQL Server to make sure that it's getting every event. I mean that it has to write all events to the files. And if you cannot keep up writing to the files, then it has to decide what to do. And with no event loss, then it's slowing down SQL Server. So that you normally don't want to use. With the other one, this one called single event loss, that's the default. Then you can like throw away individual events if it's coming too many. And the other one, multiple, then you can like throw away complete buffers that contains lots of events. So it's like a trade-off of being guaranteed of having all events versus performance. But in our environment, we say that, okay, performance is most important. So we use the one multiple event loss. This is the one we're using.
If there are too many events, a single event loss is a good trade-off?
Yeah, that's good. That's also okay. You should just not use the other one. This one, no event loss. Until you, I mean, maybe some testing could be useful, but not in production. I would not use it. Yeah. So one more thing here that, okay, so now we, let's say that we start this event here. And then, yeah, now it was maybe not so good here, RPC completed. Let's say we add one more column here. add one called error reported. And then I started. One thing I can do also here in the testing is to make it a little bit faster. I can change this one from total second to 1 second. But total second is a good default, but when testing it's just a little bit faster. So now let's say that I generate some error here. And then we can go in here and then we can say view target data. So let's see if I want to find the error I just generated. Then you can like filter. You can say filter by this value, meaning that only seeing those error reported. So you see, it's quite easy to use now when you have a user interface. Another way to do it is that, okay, let's say that you want to have a little bit more control about how you access the data. Maybe you want to do more advanced searching or grouping or whatever. Then there is a function you can use, this function here. So there is a similar function in profile or trace. There's a similar function that you can use. This is just extended event equivalent. So what you do is to specify like the path to the where the extended event file is located. You can put in a star, meaning reading all files that match that pattern, and then you can just read it. So you can have lots of files and get it like at a record set, and then as you see, then you're getting the name, the type of event, and you're getting the actual XML. So for example here, a batch completed. So this is the extended event. This is how the extended event looks like. So you have the name of the event, timestamp, like CPU duration and so on. And then those additional columns, those actions you see. Database name, host name, and so on. And this is also what makes it a bit more difficult to use because, what you get back is XML, meaning you have to use XQuery to access the data. Those of you that be using extended event, how have you been doing? Have you been using the interface, or have you been using this function, or what have you been doing? What did you say?
Not performing good enough.
This function? Okay.
So we mostly using the interface, but the function, if you have like 1 gig file,
Yeah.
extended events,
Yeah.
the SQL server takes about an hour.
Yeah, that's a downside.
That's not the storage issue. So.
Yeah, I know that is a downside. I know that one thing that makes it a bit faster is that if you're first loading it into a table before doing the XQuery. What do you know? What's taking the time? The actual loading the data or the XQuery? Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I also use files about 1 gigabyte.
Yeah.
To tables, but that's for me it's like the job. So
Yeah.
I batch it into the night,
I understand.
24 hours.
I understand. I
The
understand.
interesting is if you export it in, for example, XLS,
Yeah.
it's very fast.
Okay.
Just
Okay. Okay. Yes. So this is like how it looks like. So let's see what we have been doing. So in the beginning, we were also using the user interface, and we were using this function. The problem is also, as you say, it's slow. And one thing is also that, okay, when you have a production problem, and then you start doing this on the actual production server, because that's where you're running the extended event, then you're like getting the performance impact also from just querying the extended events on the production server. And that's of course also downside. Here are some of the challenges that we run into in the beginning. XQuery is not really easy if you're not familiar with it. And yeah, even less in a critical situation. Another thing is, of course, that maybe sometimes you want to give some people access to this performance monitoring data that don't have access to production server. How do you solve that? Another thing is that what if you want to take the data from the XEvent and correlate it with some other information, maybe from, for example, DMVs to get the text maybe, or to get the execution plan? How do you do that? There's no functionality for that in XEvent. I mean, something like, okay, when you get an event, how to go out and get the text using the DMVs or something like that. How do you do that? So what we wanted to do, we want to have something that was like running all the time on our server. That's easy with the startup option I showed before. We wanted to like move the data to a central database. So from all the production server into a central database. It should be not like just batch jobs running in the night. It should be like data should be available like in very close to real time in this central monitoring database. So we can use it also in like live incidents. We also wanted to avoid the risk of event loss in the way that if the monitoring system is down, then we don't want, I mean, should like no event should be lost. I mean, should like buffer on the production servers. There's also because there's also an option that you can like stream the event directly to your monitoring system. But then if your monitoring system is down or you have a network problem, then you're like losing data. Another goal here was it should be really easy to use without having to use an XQuery and no XQuery on the actual production servers. And as I said before, we should be able to collect the text and query plans triggered by the events. So this was like the requirements. And this is like what we came up with. We created like a default XEvent session that we're running on all servers. We have some PowerShell script that is collecting every 30 seconds. They're collecting from all our production servers, and they're using this function I was showing before. And the good thing with that function that you cannot do with the old trace function is that you can, like the first time you can read all the data, but then the next time you can pass like a file name and an offset only to like read new data, and that means that you can do it very frequently. And the key to that also performance is that you need to have small files, otherwise you're not getting good performance, because then it will, even if you specify file name and offset, it will still take quite a lot of time to read the data. It's like it's reading the whole file even if you specify this information. We store it in a central database. We are making like views to access the data. And the XQuery, we have put them either in the views or sometimes in triggers. We have put instead of triggers on the table where we're loading the data. So it's like a trade-off of if you want to have good load performance or good query performance. So this is how it looks like. We have the production servers, we have a job server, and we have this events database. And then we have DBAs and developers accessing the events database to like the performance monitoring database. Okay, let's see how it works. I will show you here. Okay, so let's say we have a common problem here that some application is getting a timeout and you're not really sure what happens. You want to figure out about it. Maybe some blocking, maybe it's something else. So I made some workload script here. This is generating a lot of calling some stop procedures. And then we have this one causing some blocking. So then we should try to see what happens. So now I will connect to this central monitoring database. And then I have one view here that I call aborted executions that we can use. So I try querying this one. Okay. Okay, now you see some data is coming in. So let's have a closer look at this and try to understand what happened here. One thing that we can do first is that there is something called, in extended event, there's something called attach activity ID. And that is like, you can say, some kind of correlation ID for all events in like the same execution. So that's like a good way of filtering, meaning that those events here, they are like related. So let's put in that as a filter. Okay, and there's also a sequence number. So which sequence did event come in this specific execution? So let's see what we have here. We have a batch completed, that is like the last one, where we can see the statement with the parameters that was timing out. We can see here the result code, abort, normally a timeout. And we can see here also that there was some module end. That means that is the same as store procedure completed, it was called in Profiler before. So we can see here that there's like two different store procedures. And the wait info, that is like, okay, SQL Server was waiting for something, and then there's something called a wait type. So this is something with logs, meaning that, okay, this looks like a blocking situation. But then what was really blocking them, that we don't know yet, but that we want to find out about. We can see here also what was the actual statement being executed that this was blocked on. That's quite useful also. And this is something, if we look at the event here, so this is the wait info event. We see here there's no statement here, but there is an let's see here. There is this SQL handle. So this is actually what we're doing here, taking the SQL handle, going out, getting the text from the SQL Server, and correlated that into the view. It's also possible to get, the advantage here is that you only have to get the text like one time, and then you have the text in the database, and then every time there comes a wait info, for example, with the same SQL handle, then you already have the text. You don't have to go out and get it again. So it's quite an efficient way of doing it. So let's see here again to try to figure out some more what happens. We have another view here called block processes. And what we can do is then that we can take from the first one, we can take a transaction ID, and then we can take that, put that into the other one. Oh, it takes a bit of time here. I should say also that this block process event that is using something called a block process threshold. I don't know, block process reports. Have you been using that, either in trace or in extended events? So how that works is that there is a special SP configure threshold that is called block process threshold. And if you're setting that, then every time there happens a blocking, and you have an event either in trace or extended event, then you will get an event with the information about the blocking, who was the blocker and who was being blocked. So that's quite a useful feature. So here we can see, then we're getting those events, block process reports for this specific transaction IDs. And it's also like this with this block process report that SQL Server is checking this normally every 5 seconds normally. And every time it is checking it, it is there's like what's called a monitor loop ID. And what you can do then is that you can take this monitor loop ID, and then you can see, okay, everything that was happening in that specific monitor loop. Okay, so now we get all blocking information from this specific point in time. something. I'll just wait. Okay, hold on here. Okay. So what's interesting here also is that then you get what's called a root blocker, and then you can see the statement here that was actually a blocker. So this is the one. Then you can see who was the blocker, and you can see that was the same as I was executing here in my blocking script. So any question about this demo? So this is like how we've been troubleshooting these kind of problems. Okay, I will proceed to the next demo. Okay, let's say that we have a deadlock. So I'm going to generate some deadlocks. Okay, it just takes a few seconds. Okay, so now some deadlocks are coming in. So let's say that we are looking at one individual deadlocks. So then there is a view here to parse the data so that you can see more easily what was the login name, what was the object names involved. You can see that who was the, let's see here, who was the victim, who was not the victim, and so on. And the same way you can analyze what are different resources involved. So this is like a way of parsing, taking the deadlock graphs that is in XML format and try to parse that into a more easy way to access the data. And especially if you have a lot of deadlocks, then that is really useful, because otherwise this can be that you maybe start analyzing one deadlock, but you don't really know. It is like the most common deadlock scenario. If you have this way of, if you parse it like this, then you can easily see what are like the most common deadlock scenarios, what objects are most commonly involved in deadlocks, what store procedures and so on, or what tables. Okay, I will proceed to, I have one more demo here. So one other problem that sometimes run into is that maybe an application is inserting some data or doing something and getting some errors, and you're not really sure why was the errors coming, what data was the application trying to insert or update that was triggering the error, and you want to try to figure it out. So let's say that this is the application, and it tries to do some inserts here. Okay, something is bad here. too long field or something. And okay, let's have a look. So then I have another view here for errors. Why do I still have the deadlocks? Yeah, so then we're getting those string or binary data will be truncated. Problem is that you cannot really see. You can see the statement here, but you don't really see the values. You just see like the parameters, and that is not very useful. You want to see exactly what data try to insert. So what you can do is then that there is another event here, or actually an action. So if we look at this database health session again, what you can do is in the reported, then there is one action called SQL text, and that is the same as that's like the input buffer you're catching then, same as DBC's input buffer. So let's try this again. Okay, so now we see here, now we're getting this SQL text, and if we look at that, what did you say?
The blocking processes are still running.
Yeah. Oh, that's why I couldn't get it working. Thank you. That's why it's okay. Okay. Oh, so let's see if we can find it. Okay, here we have the batch. Okay, so now you see here we're getting like the complete input here, including all the parameters and all the values and everything. So that is quite good. The only downside with this and the risk with that is that, as you see, each of those event here, each of those are reported event, they contain like the complete input. So there were like 10 events, and each of those events contains all the 10 statements, all the 10 insert statements. That means, of course, that if you have a big batch, 1,000 statements, for example, in one batch where everything fails, then this is generating huge amount of event data, because each event will then be 1,000 events, and each of the events will be 1,000 statements in the same events. So that's why I'm not using this in default. But it's very useful for troubleshooting otherwise. Any questions about the demos? How they worked or anything? Yeah.
How are you capturing? How are you using PowerShell to import data from the file into the database?
PowerShell is calling this function that I was showing before. So it's reading all the time. It's like polling from the production source server, and then it's bulk loading into the target database. and then it's using this function, as I said before, with a file name and offset. So it's like starting with checking what is for this specific server, what is the highest file name and offset I have in my database, and then it's take those as parameters, passes that to the function, getting data, and then like doing the same again.
So you do like a SQL command on the partial side, reading the data, storing it into an object, and then doing a session to reverse.
Yes, yes. You can look at the script afterwards. They will be available. Any other questions? So let's have a closer look at this database health that that we're using. So this is like the default session that we are running on all the servers. The reason for the name, Microsoft has one default one called System Health, so we came up with another one called Database Health. So we are capturing the RPC completed, batch completed, RPC completed, module end, errors, deadlocks, and also those wait info and the blocking. Those are like the main one we are capturing. So just to go through the flow here again, so an event is fired on the SQL server, and it's written to the buffer, and then after this dispatch latency time, it's written to like flush the file, and then the PowerShell script comes, and they're using this function, and they are moving it to the event database. When it's getting into the event database, then we have this instead of trigger, and what's happening then is that we're taking like the most important information from the XML document and like parsing that out and storing that as like its own columns. So for example, objects name, database name, login name, session name, this kind of information we are storing in its own columns, so that when we're going to query it, then we don't need to do any XQuery. And then lastly, we have this what we call post actions, meaning that we're going out and get additional information like a text or a query plan, and store that also in the database. And then finally, when you access the data through a view, then there might be additional XQuery, additional joins between events table, DMV tables, and so on. Just like the flow of the system. As I said before, the latency. So there's like this dispatch latency. It's we're using 30 seconds as the default, and we're running the PowerShell script every 30 seconds. So like the total latency is about 1 minute from when something happens in the system, production system, until it's like available for querying in a monitoring system. In demo, I've been just setting it a bit lower to speed it up. Then there's this question I was saying before about the XQuery. So in the beginning, we were doing like, we're just loading the data into a table, and then we made all the XQuery in the views. But the downside with that is, of course, that when you're going to query the data, then it becomes quite slow. So then we started taking like the most important information and extracting that at load time in a trigger, and we can also index those columns, and then of course it becomes a little bit more cost when you load the data, but much faster when you query the data. So that's like a trade-off. Things, columns that we're not accessing that frequently, or maybe that we don't need to filter on, then we just do the XQuery in the views instead of in the triggers. Just like a balance. This one I've talked about. Yeah, so this was I mentioned before about the texts. Events like, for example, a module end or wait info, statement, stop procedure statement completed, and so on. They have this column called SQL handle. And what you can do then is that you can take that one, and then you can go out and get, using this DMV or dynamic management function, you can go out and get the actual text from the production server. And then we store the SQL handles together with the text. So like once we have collected one SQL handle with the text once, then we have that like in a text table, and then we're just joining those things together in the views. So yeah, that's quite useful. There's also something called offsets, and let's see if we can show that also. So for example, the one I was showing before, this, let's say that you have a wait info event, and that's a store procedure that you're waiting for, but you want to know what exact statement in a store procedure is it that's like waiting for, maybe it's blocked or whatever. Then inside event there's also like a start offset and an end offset that you can use to calculate the exact statement within the text, within the store procedure. And that is the same as like you also have in DMVs. For example, exec request have the same concept. They also have those SQL handle and the offsets. So it's like that is the same. Another thing is how to do with query plans. That was a bit more tricky. So actually with the problem is that you can have they have some called a plan handle, but the problem is that a plan can change, but you can still have the same plan handle. So what I'm doing there is that in some cases, for example in a wait info event, then you have a plan handle and you have some other information like the offsets, you have something called query hash and a query plan hash, and then I'm like, okay, I store the plan together with all this information. I go out and get the plan and get this additional information, and then I store that with a plan. And the next time I get an event with the same combination of columns, then I already have the plan. Then I don't need to go out and get it again. So that's like a way of correlating it together. The problem is that in some cases you only have a plan handle. For example, in the module end, then you only have a plan handle. And then it's like, from what I found, you cannot just store the plan and together with plan handle and then just reference that every time, because I said a plan could have changed, still keeping the same plan handle. So then like you have to go out and get the plan right after the event every time. That's how I've been doing it. So it's more easy and more efficient in event like waiting for the statement level events, because then you have those additional informations. Another thing that is, like I said before, a little bit before, so when you're using this function to poll events, from the beginning I had problems that I was not getting very good performance, because I was thinking that, okay, if you just pass the file name and an offset, then it will only read like the last part of the file. But it's like, even if you pass that, it's still reading like the complete file. So therefore the trick there was to have very small file and have many files instead to improve performance. And then it only takes like, if you query it very frequently, then it only takes like, there will only be a few events every time, and it only takes a millisecond every time to read it. And when I read it from production server, I only call a function. I don't do any XQuery at all on the actual production server. That is done in the monitoring server to reduce the load on the production server. Yeah, this is one problem that you can run into also. So what can happen is that, let's say that you have a file name and an offset, and then maybe a huge amount of events is generated on a production server. And then you come, maybe your monitoring system had been down maybe for 5 minutes or 1 hour or whatever, and then you come the next time and say that, oh, here's my file name and the offset, can you give me everything that is bigger than this? And then you can get this back saying that, oh, this offset is not valid. And that is because the file that you are passing in, that doesn't exist anymore, because that's been like rolled over on the production server. Maybe they only have 5 files or 10 files or whatever, and then it can happen that that's been rolled over if it's been a lot of events generated. So then it's nothing to do, then you have to like read all the files again from the beginning. I mean, because all files, or the file you had before doesn't exist anymore. Yeah, that was what I wanted to present. Any questions about anything? Okay, thank you. Yeah, please.
Will you share these codes?
Yeah, you can just download. I didn't say that, but the code is free. It's you're welcome to download it and use it as you like. There are also some README file how to install it, or if you just want to look at the script, PowerShell, or the complete database is there also. So yeah, okay, thank you.